The Kings move 2 points closer to a playoff spot. We discuss that and get your thoughts on a Feedback Friday on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We would love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you like the show. And we are on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're viewing this show and you're enjoying the content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Well, the LA Kings played their third of 9 games left in the final month of the regular season, and they played back-to-back games for the final time this season in San Jose against the Sharks on Thursday night. As for the lineup for the LA Kings in this one, we knew that Philip Deneau would be out, but what would the Kings setup be like? They did return to that 11-7 setup, the 11 forwards and the 7 defensemen. Rookie Akil Thomas would draw back into the lineup. He would be on the fourth line with Alex Laferriere, and that meant Arthur Kaliyev was back out of the lineup. And as usual, when the Kings go with that 11-7 setup, the extra defenseman would be Jacob Moverar. As for the goaltender, Cam Talbot would not be in net. Disregard that on the graphic. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, it would be David Riddick, the number 2 goalie for the LA Kings, would be in net in this one. So if you missed the game, we'll give you a quick recap as usual. The Kings did jump out to a 1-0 lead, which is always a good sign. Adrian Kempe scoring unassisted. Juice won a race for the puck, skated it in and scored on the breakaway, his 25th goal of the season. Then just 18 seconds later, Akil Thomas would score his first career NHL goal, a wrist shot, with his former AHL teammate Jordan Spence and Pierre Dubois adding the assists. There would be no scoring in the second period. The Kings did have to kill off another double minor penalty for the second straight game. Third period, no scoring until the final moments when the Sharks pulled their goalie for the extra attacker. They scored to make it 2-1. The Kings then had to hold off San Jose when they pulled the goalie again with about a little over a minute to go. But in the end, the Kings get the 2-1 victory. As for the game stats in this one, Kings win it 2-1. Shots on goal favored LA 27-16. As far as the power plays, well, no power on either power plays for either team. The Kings were 0-4 and San Jose was 0-3. Faceoffs favored LA 25-24. Block shots favored San Jose 13-9, and hits favored the Sharks 16-8. So considering how bad the Kings have been in the second of back-to-back games this season, I'm choosing to be satisfied with this win. LA, if you don't recall, came into this game with a record of 3-6-2 on the season in the second of back-to-back games. And when they've been on the road for that second game of the back-to-back, the Kings were 1-5 before getting the win over the Sharks. The Kings have now won 7 games in a row when scoring the first goal, and they finished the season with a 3-0-1 record against their Northern California rivals. All right, so one word to describe the Kings' 2-1 win over the Sharks. I'm going to go with adequate. Adequate is defined in the dictionary as sufficient for a specific need or requirement, good enough, and of quality that is acceptable. Was it a great performance by the Kings? I wouldn't go there. Were the Kings ever in any real danger of losing this game? I didn't feel like they were. Did things get a little bit too close for comfort late in the game, wherein it never should have been in that position? Yes. The Kings were clearly the better team. LA dominated the possession time. They had the puck in the Sharks' end most of the game. San Jose only had 1 or 2 grade A scoring chances the entire game. That said, the Sharks did have a chance to tie it up in the final moments and maybe force overtime or a shootout, and then who knows? And that should not have happened. The Kings should have gotten a third goal at some point in the second or third period to put this one away. Still, LA ends up getting the win, getting 2 points, and moving closer to a playoff spot. But I would say that performance was adequate. What did the LA Kings head coach Jim Hiller have to say about this game? Well, he said, quote, "You always want the Picasso every time you play. You're always looking for perfection. We didn't have that tonight, but in the end, all anybody cares about tomorrow is did you get the 2 points or didn't you? So we'll take the 2 points. We'll leave this one behind. We'll have a rest tomorrow, and then we'll work on the next 2 points." That was LA Kings head coach Jim Hiller. And yes, that's kind of the generic standard answer. It certainly was not a Picasso or any other kind of classic performance by the LA Kings. But yes, in the end, you take the 2 points. But I will disagree a little bit with the Kings head coach on this point. I don't think it's just about the 2 points at this time of the year. Like I said, considering it was back to back and the second game was on the road, it's a tough situation, even if you're playing a bad team. So I will take the 2 points in that specific situation. But going forward, the Kings aren't playing back to back the rest of the way. They've got one more road game in Anaheim, and then everything else is at home. So just getting the 2 points going forward, to me, I'm not going to say that's just the final, answer to the question. It is how the Kings are playing. It is how they perform as far as making the most of opportunities. Certainly the power play in this one we'll talk about more in a second when we talk about the pluses and minuses. But like I said, in this specific situation, okay, I'll take that answer. But going forward, it needs to be about how they're playing, not just getting the 2 points. So after a Kings win, we're always excited to name 3 stars. I've got my 3 stars of the game for the win over San Jose. For the number 3 star, I'm going to go with David Riddick. Now, big save Dave didn't have to make any big saves really in this one. 15 shots he turns aside, pretty routine for the most part. The one goal he allowed was with the Sharks getting the extra attacker. He was very close to getting a shutout in this one. So I'll give him the number 3 star in this one. My number 2 star is Adrian Kempe, scoring that first goal of the game, his 25th of the season. He did, with that goal, now post a new career high in points. That was his 68th point this season, most he's ever had in a season, and it's not over yet. And while I'm sure Juice is disappointed that his goals numbers aren't as high as he would like, again, 25 goals. He had 35 2 seasons ago and a career high 41 last season. But he is posting more assists, a career high 41 assists this season, as I mentioned, now a career high in points with 68 and counting. So certainly he's becoming a more well-rounded player, I think it's fair to say. But I think he would also like to score more goals. And we certainly saw on that breakaway, he is still arguably the Kings' top pure goal scorer in putting that one away. My number 1 star, though, is Akil Thomas. And even though this performance, it wasn't, one of the best of the year for the Kings, I think the big takeaway here is Akil Thomas in his second NHL game getting his first NHL goal. That was the really feel-good, awesome takeaway moment from this game. And nice to see him get more playing time. He had less than 4 minutes in his NHL debut against Winnipeg. He had almost 9 minutes of ice time against the Sharks. So that was good to see. And I have to be honest, and I'm pretty sure I said this earlier in the year when we had a Feedback Friday show. Somebody asked about Akil Thomas maybe getting a call-up. And I said at the time, I thought it was pretty unlikely unless there were injuries to the Kings. I didn't see Akil getting the call-up, but he's gotten his chance. Certainly a very small sample size of just 2 games, but I think he's looked pretty good. And potentially, depending on what the Kings roster looks like next season, you would have to think that Akil is in a position to maybe be a bottom 6 forward for the Kings next season or in the near future. So again, good for the Kings to have a homegrown guy finally get a shot, show what he can do, get his first NHL goal. That was definitely the highlight of the game against San Jose. As for the pluses and minuses, that's positive takeaways from this one. Like I said, the Kings were by far the better team in this one. They had long stretches of zone time, cycling the puck, something we haven't seen a lot of lately from the Kings. The power play, though, they had chances to score. We'll talk about that in a second. But the San Jose power play never was a threat to score this one. The Kings penalty kill absolutely dominated them, so that was good to see. The scoreboard, like I said, 2-0 for most of the game. But it felt like it was more than that. It felt like it was a much more lopsided game, just watching the way the teams were playing on the ice. As far as the negatives, though, not putting the Sharks away. The game should never have been even close to being in doubt at the end of the game. The Sharks should never have had a chance to try and tie up that game late. The Kings had multiple opportunities, especially on the power play, to get that third goal, if not more, and end this one and not have any drama at the end. So the power play is still struggling, and that's unfortunate. So that's certainly a negative to take away from this. And it's not like the Sharks have a great penalty kill; they don't. So should never have been, like I said, in any kind of doubt the rest of the way. But the result was good, 2 points, and the Kings are now closer to clinching a playoff spot. So where exactly are the Kings now in the standings and in the playoff race? We'll update you on that next year on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from another retirement account with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with the 3% match. The offer is good through April the 30th. So get started at robinhood.com/boost, BOOST. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investment involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year. From the date of the first 3% match, must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. All right, we've got your emails coming up on a fan feedback show, but let's check the standings in the Pacific Division and the Western Conference playoff race going into tonight's action on Friday. Kings move 1 point back of Vegas for third in the Pacific with their win over the Sharks, and they're now 7 points up on St. Louis for the final wildcard spot in the West. Looking at the standings, you got Vancouver, who's the only team in the West so far to clinch a playoff spot. They've got 102 points to lead the Pacific. Edmonton is in second place with 95 points. Vegas in third with 92, and then the Kings 91 points. As far as the wild card race, the Kings are 1 point back of Nashville, the Predators with 92 points. They beat the Blues last night 6-3. St. Louis now 84 points with that loss. So I know that Nick Nixon said on the broadcast, good news, the Blues lost. Actually, I would have preferred the Blues won that game because I think the Kings are going to make the playoffs. I don't think St. Louis is going to catch us. And I would have rather seen the Kings move in front of the Predators for the number one wildcard spot with Nashville losing, but that did not happen. So that's where the points stand as we go into Friday's action. If the playoffs started today, it would be the Kings against the Dallas Stars in the first round. Stars have a 3-point lead on Colorado for the top spot in the Central Division. Nashville, again, 1 point lead on LA for the number one wildcard spot. Now, if the Kings can catch Nashville and pass them to get that number one wildcard spot, they would likely face Vancouver in the first round of the playoffs. The Canucks are 3 points back of Dallas, by the way, for the top spot in the West. So the Kings' next game is Saturday home against the Canucks. Obviously, a much better and bigger test for the Kings than it has been the last couple of games against Seattle and San Jose. Kings get a day off. Back on home ice, I expect the effort and the execution to be much better against the Vancouver Canucks on Saturday. LA is 2-0-1 against the Canucks this season. Vancouver's still without their number one goalie, Thatcher Demko, who's been out since March the 9th with a knee injury. As for games of interest coming up tonight and over the weekend for the Kings, the Oilers will host the Avalanche. Edmonton can clinch a playoff spot with a win or an overtime or shootout loss tonight, and the Golden Knights will be at the Coyotes. This weekend, the Predators play at the Islanders Saturday, then at the Devils on Sunday. The Oilers are at the Flames Saturday, and Vegas has the weekend off. All right, let's get to some of your feedback. It is a Kings Fan Feedback Friday. I'm going to read the emails in the order in which they were received, and it is possible that I had to do a little bit of editing for time reasons. Our first email comes from Ruben in West Covina. He says, I called it earlier in the season. Kempe needs to have that A on his jersey. Juice Man deserves it. Glad he was an alternate captain against the Flames. Go Kings, go. Go Rain, go. And Ruben says he is a proud everydayer. Yeah, Adrian Kempe is wearing the A with Philip Deneau out of the lineup as the alternate captain. And yeah, it's good to see Juice get that recognition as being one of the leaders on the team. I will say I've always thought that, those types of things should be voted on by the team at the beginning of the year. And maybe you can make an argument for captain because, that's obviously a position of honor. And maybe I don't even know how the Kings do it, to be honest with you. Maybe they do that. But I've always felt that should be something decided by your teammates. It feels weird for a coaching staff or a GM to name a captain. That does happen for sure. And maybe that has happened with the Kings. I'm not totally sure about that. And look, Andre Kopitar is the obvious, and Drew Doughty should be wearing the A as well. Those two guys definitely should have the letters on their sweater. Look, I like Philip Deneau a lot. I think, again, if the players had voted him as a alternate captain, then he certainly deserves it. But I think more often than not, if you're just asking me, I think I'd like more of the homegrown guys to have that letter on their sweater, and that would certainly apply to Adrian Kempe. He has turned into one of the leaders on the team. Obviously drafted by LA and all that. So, if it were me, I would prefer to see him with the A rather than Philip Deneau, who obviously came from another team and wasn't drafted by LA. But again, like I said, I think the players should vote on that. I think it should be their decision on who the leaders of the team are and that kind of a thing, and who would they honor by doing that. And maybe the Kings do that. I honestly don't know. I'll have to ask maybe Zach Dooley, the Kings insider, knows next time we have him on. Our next email comes from Mason in Arizona, and he says he is a everydayer. Appreciate that, Mason. He says, "Hey, Eddie, I do not regret having a new head coach at all this season. Jim Hiller got off to a fantastic start. He got that big win that the Kings needed. However, there is one thing about Hiller that I am wondering what the purpose is: the constant changing of the lines. When something doesn't work, he fixes it, and I can't blame him for that. But when it does work, he still changes it. The players need to get used to who they're playing with over and over again. What we should be doing is making them feel comfortable with who they're playing with. What are your thoughts? Thanks for the amazing podcast, and go Kings go." All right. Thank you, Mason, for the email. I do tend to agree with you a little bit. I think that while I do like some of the things Jim Hiller has done since taking over for Todd McClellan and not being afraid to tweak and to kind of move things around, there are times where I do agree with you. There are times where I feel like maybe the change isn't necessary. The one spot that I've disagreed all season long with for the Kings is what they're doing with some of their bottom six forwards. Like your top three lines, I get that, trying to be as consistent as possible, but I think there should be, as a coach, I would want to get my guys as much ice time as possible on the bottom end. I would have had a rotation going with Trevor Lewis and Alex Laferriere and Alex Turcotte and now Akil Thomas and Trevor Lewis and Arthur Kaliyev. Like, get those guys, have some kind of a rotation where they're not sitting for long stretches of games. Get them more ice time if possible, with some sort of a rotation, especially against your quote unquote lesser competition. So that's one thing I think that he and Todd McClellan could have done a better job at. And this email comes from Noah, and he's in Asia somewhere. He was not specific as to where he is in Asia. Asia is an awfully big place. So Noah, if you do email again, let us know where you are exactly in Asia. But he says, "I'm hoping to send the Kings some good vibes from Asia to get them ready for the playoffs. Yes, I do think the Kings will make the playoffs. The only uncertainty is who their opponent's going to be coming into the season. I wanted to meet and beat the Oilers. The 4-0 win gave me hope, but then we lost the last game against them and the PK gave up a goal. Hopefully the Kings can play better this time and get a better result in the first round. Let's hope the Kings get Deneau back and healthy for the playoffs. Go Kings go." So Noah is, I would say, one of them in the minority of Kings fans who actually wants to face the Edmonton Oilers in the first round. I've said it. I've got mixed feelings on it. On the one hand, it would be awesome to beat those guys and get out of the first round by beating them. But on the other hand, losing 3 in a row, that would be tough. That would be tough. So I think Kings fans, for the most part, are thinking about the negative rather than the positive. We got some more emails coming up here on Locked On LA Kings. Going to talk about Rob Blake. That coming up here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it is easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. The LA Kings face the Vancouver Canucks Saturday, 7 p.m. Pacific time. Catch every moment of the hometown broadcast of your LA Kings with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search LA Kings. And I will be out at that game against the Canucks on Saturday. So if you're heading out to crypto.com arena and want to meet up, let me know on social media. You can send an email or however you can contact me. I'd be happy to say hello. Let's get some more emails in. This one's from Jeremiah. He's in Hawthorne. He says he's an everydayer. Thank you, Jeremiah, for that. He says, how do you see the roster being different if a new GM comes in? Can he buy out some of the players? And do you see the GM making big moves this offseason? I will be at the Ducks game on Tuesday, my first Kings away game, so that should be fun. Go Kings, go. Yes, going to away games has been one of my favorite things. I've mentioned before, my wife has been a long time diehard LA Chargers fan, San Diego LA Chargers fan. And we go to a road game pretty much every year, kind of plan a vacation around it. And it's always really fun to go on those road games. And I've been on a few Kings road games as well. You'll have fun, especially in Anaheim, frankly, where a lot of Kings fans go and a lot of Duck fans don't go to the games because they don't like all the Kings fans there. Those can be some very, very fun games. So Jeremiah, I think you're going to really have a good time with that. As far as a new GM and what he could do, it's really tough to say because you don't know who that new GM is. You don't know what his philosophy is going to be. You don't know who the coach is that he's going to hire and what his philosophy is going to be. So it's really difficult to say exactly what a new GM is going to do as far as changes to the roster because we don't know, again, what his philosophy is and what coach he's going to hire. So I would think if that does happen, there will be some changes, but not drastic changes to the Kings lineup. They're not going to go into another rebuild. They'll maybe a retool is something that would be more realistic. Scott in Simi Valley also checking in on the general manager of the Kings. He says, I think the Kings will make the playoffs, but can we honestly expect a deep run? Blake did some good things and then rushed the rebuild with the Dubois signing, and that will be his downfall. The Kings need to do their best this postseason, but the real need is to shed the Dubois contract before his no trade clause kicks in, accept the roster, building process is ongoing, and put themselves in a cap position to do so. We are not a serious cup contender, and even so, Rob Blake stressed in his recent press conference, this is the team. Of course it is. He's tied his own hands by going in on PLD. The Kings need to become a well-rounded and harder to play against team and perhaps add another goaltender. As much as I love Blake as a player, we need a new GM to kickstart this effort. Even if the Kings win a round, in my opinion, it changes nothing. Thanks, Eddie, and go Kings, go. And we have this from Edwin in Brea. He says, looking back, Rob Blake built this team wrong. Instead of building from the goalie out, he went forward out like an upside down tree. Your goalie is the roots. Your defense is the tree's trunk, and your forwards are the branches that produce fruit like goals. The playoffs are a storm, and a team/tree with strong roots makes it through the storm. Interesting. Very philosophical. He says goaltending has been good, however, not great. And at times you need a goaltender to carry your team through the storm. Like our Cup years and Florida last season, goaltending carries a team in the playoffs, and the Kings do not have that. That is why I expect us to have another disappointing year since our GM did not focus on goaltending, which may have him relieved of his duties. I will say Jim Hiller's done a good job sailing the Kings to the playoffs. Looks like Dubois is playing better and more in Fiala on the second line, or with more in Fiala on the second line. Also nice to see a SoCal product get his second Hattie, talking about Trevor Moore, and he says, go, Kings, go. I kind of like the philosophy you're talking about, building from the net out. I certainly get that. You did mention, though, Florida and the goaltending, and it did help them get to the final, but who won the Stanley Cup last year? I was the Vegas Golden Knights, and what was their goaltending like? It was good enough. Aiden Hill. Come on. Cam Talbot's better than that guy. Of course, the proof is, getting it done in the playoffs. I get that, but I'm just saying that, you got your example, I've got my example. I've said it all along. I don't think you need to have a Hall of Fame goalie in net to win a Stanley Cup, or a Vezina Trophy winning goalie to win a Stanley Cup. We've seen different philosophies, and there's certainly examples of both on both sides. But I'm okay with spending on the branches and the trunk of the tree rather than the roots of the tree necessarily. But there are people who agree with that philosophy that you have, Edwin, as well. And we should point out, Edwin is a beer league goaltender, so he's got strong opinions on the goalie position. As for what the Kings are going to do in the offseason with Rob Blake, I will say this, and I've seen comments about this, and I think that Scott and Simi Valley kind of alluded to this, that the Kings didn't see through the rebuilding process, that they thought they were better than they were, and they kind of jumped the gun, and they tried to go for a cup sooner rather than later, instead of continuing the slow, steady, stay the course rebuild. And in hindsight, you can certainly point to that and say you're right, but I'm not a Rams fan, but I love what the Rams did when they went all in and traded all those picks and won a Super Bowl. That's what I want my team to do. I want them to go for it. I don't want them to sit back and say we've got a 5-year plan to get this right. And I understand that there are certainly examples of teams doing that and then having a sustained, run of success, which is of course what we ultimately want. But there's also plenty of examples of teams rebuilding and they still suck. The San Jose Sharks, man, if you watch that game, they're bad. They're a really bad team. They're in a rebuild now. There's no guarantee in 5 years that they're going to be a Stanley Cup contender. The Ottawa Senators have been in a rebuild for many, many years, and they're still not good. They're not making the playoffs again this year. So I get the point that's being made, and I'm not saying it's wrong necessarily, but it's easy to look back and say now, oh, we should have done this and that. What if we were Stanley Cup contenders this year? Nobody would be saying that. But I'm just saying, for me, I want my teams to go for winning and not rebuild and be slow. And if you think you have an opportunity to go for it, let's go for it. Isn't that what this is all about? Trying to win a Stanley Cup? Again, I understand the point, and it's not necessarily wrong. I'm just saying, for me, the Kings were ahead of this curve, right? When they made the playoffs that first year, 2 years ago. And we're like, okay, maybe we're a little bit better than we think we are. So let's add. And they got a little bit better. And they tried to add again and get a little bit better. I don't know. That's what I want my team to do. I want them to add. I want them to go for it. Whether that ends up being the right move or not, that certainly remains to be seen. Hey, thank you to everyone who took the time to email. Really appreciate it. Obviously, this type of show, this feedback show, is not possible without your participation. If you want to send an email for a future show, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. So thank you to everyone for the emails. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Monday's show, we'll recap that Kings-Canucks game from Saturday, let you know where the Kings are in the playoff race after the weekend, preview the week ahead, and also have a rain report. Tuesday, we're going to preview the Kings-Ducks game coming up that night. Wednesday, we'll recap that game. Thursday, we'll preview the Kings-Flames that night. Friday, recap that game, and then have another fan feedback show. And we'll see if we can't mix in a guest at some point along the way next week as well. Hope you'll join us for next week's episodes. If you would like to stay interactive with the show, follow us on social media. We're on X, Twitter, and Instagram at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. And as always, go Kings, go.